Chapter 10 is about the future tense. Before you got to this chapter, there were several pages of review for verb formation. You should look over the review pages, try to spot the patterns. Those patterns are going to be very useful for doing the future. So do go look through all the present tense verbs you have and the present tense participles in both the active and the middle voice. But then there's a presentation of all the future forms you learn. And I find this page mostly just scary and unhelpful. You don't know what these words mean. Things like aorist, perfect, imperfect, things like that. And you don't know the sort of rules that make sense of the different spellings. So it looks scarier than it is. So my suggestion is you can look at it, but don't overdo it. Don't spend much time on that sort of flash forward because it's going to scare you. And realistically, as we'll start to see with this future, the forms are actually predictable. They're sort of derived. You learn one new rule, one new way to change something you already know, and you get a new set of endings. For the most part, it's actually not all that scary. So this is perhaps the clearest illustration of that. To create the future tense, you add a sigma between the stem and the ending. Everything else pretty much stays the same. It's really quite nice. So, first of all, what's the future? The future is your first new tense. So far, everything you've learned has been present tense. Now, tense in Greek is a combination of two things. We're used to thinking of tense in English as simply time, but tense is in fact a combination of time and aspect. Time are categories you're very familiar with. Present tense, happening, something about now. It's about now. Future tense, about later. Past tense, about past. And those are basically your three times. But there are also three aspects in this language, we'll see. There is the perfective aspect, is the language they use. That's fine, but think of perfective as meaning just complete. There's the complete aspect and the what's called the imperfective or the incomplete aspect. And this means that the action we're describing is either finished or unfinished, complete or incomplete at the time we're discussing. So you can have both a present complete, it's called the present perfect. You can have a present incomplete, a future complete, future incomplete. That one's a little bit complicated. We'll learn later. And then most importantly, you can have a past complete and a past incomplete, right? So those are all kind of all the tenses. There's one more aspect, however. There is the aspectual, the aorist, the non-aspectual, the something like the simple, although that's actually a little bit misleading. So we'll talk about this at greater length when we come to it. But the point here is that for every time there are at least two aspects, and it is the combination of those that makes a tense. So the present tense that you've learned is in fact the present time incomplete aspect. It is a ongoing action in the present, sometimes called a present progressive in English. So the present tense is a present time incomplete aspect. Today we're going to learn the future. Those categories will help you if you go back and look at the section I told you to skip. This is the section of all the different breakdowns, because you find there's something called the incomplete tense and the the imperfect tense and the perfect tense. Well, those are two past tenses, kind of, with different aspects. So we're coming to that later. The pluperfect is actually the other past tense. Future incomplete is what the future is. So future time, ongoing in the future. And it's really easy to learn. It's all the forms you already know. Lu, your stem lu, or whatever stem you have, plus your endings, o, ace, a, amana, eta, usa, the same endings you've already known. And we're going to put a sigma in between. The sigma is going to be this, I guess it's a suffix. I think of it like an infix, but I think it's a suffix, technically, between your stem and your ending. And that's your future. It's the easiest one, perhaps. So take a look. So that's the basic case study. Now, as with all things, there are times where letters bump up against each other that don't just to get to stay what they are, separate clear, distinct letters. You get everything in the rest of this chapter. I think that's true. I think, except for one set of irregular verbs at the end. But basically, everything else in the rest of this chapter, all the other little grammar sections, are just explanations of what happens when a letter bumps up against the sigma of the future and they don't sound good together, or you can't hear them together, or maybe they sound really good together, so they have a different letter to represent what they sound like together. For instance, the letter pi, p, the p sound, next to a sigma, s, makes the sound ps. That's going to be really awful on a microphone. But that psi sound, they have a separate letter for. It's called the psi. You've learned it. It looks like this, like a pitchfork. And this is actually going to be true of all the what are called labial sounds. B, p, and fa, which fa is actually not, we talked about this, is not actually how it's pronounced in ancient Greek. Fa was actually pronounced pa with sorry about all the plosives on the microphone, but with an aspirated p, basically. So those three, all those sounds have this sort of b, p, and fa, psa, fa, all the ones that sound terrible on a microphone. All of those next to a sigma are going to create the letter psi. Same thing happens with g, k, and k. The gamma, the chi, and the ki. There's a letter for that sound. When a chi is followed by a sigma, you get xi. The separate letter. So those are just combinations of sigmas with other letters to create sort of regular sounds. Nothing tricky there, but that means something like grapho is going to become gropso. Something like blepo is stem blep. You're going to put a sigma there and an O, but it's not. But it's going to be printed like this, blepsomai, right? So that one happens to be slightly weird because of deponent things. But these two are extremely normal. Pempo becomes pemso. Yep. So those are your contracts with labials. And you can look through these other examples. They explain it. In each case, there's something funny where the sigma can't stand between two vowels, or this is actually has to do with the sigma displacing a zeta, and then between two vowels it just drops away. Let's see, what other examples do we have here? Oops. So dentals, d, and s don't follow nice each other. Like, do we ever have I guess we do sometimes, but the ds sound was apparently, the Greeks didn't like the sound of it. So the d's disappear, d's and t's generally disappear before the sigma. So you just get an extra shortened ending. So patho becomes peso. Still super recognizable, right? You just lost your theta. Every so often you get like shortened stem forms, which is what that is. Deponent futures are just deponent verbs that only exist deponent futures are verbs that have an active voice in the present, but for whatever reason, and I'm not sure I even know the logic for this. I think I don't know the logic for this. I'm not sure there is a logic for this, but for whatever reason, the future only exists in the middle voice, and it functions as if it were active. So akuo, for instance, if you want to make akuo future, you can't say akuso. You have to say akusomai. It was just the convention, and I think I can't give you anything more on that, unfortunately. I think that might be all I can say. So there's a handful of verbs that do that. Not tricky, though. Like, basically, pretty clear what's going on, pretty clear how to translate those things. The only... Let's see here. Where is Amy? The one tricky thing in this chapter, which is not all that bad. Liquid and nasals, sigmas disappear. So this word asigmatic, it means the sigma has disappeared. Try to put an lemnar, liquids, L-R-M-N-N. We use lemnar as a sort of way to remember what the liquids are. It's just a made-up word. So lemnar followed by an S, that S is not going to stand. The S is going to disappear. So you go from meno to meno with a diphthong marking a lost letter, marking the lost sigma. So those are looking to be tricky. You just got to watch out for the macron as evidence that some letters have disappeared, and that's happened because sigmas don't do well after liquids. Here's the only weird thing in this chapter, and it's just a thing you kind of got to remember, and it's not usually a problem except when it is. And that is there is a super weirdo word. The verb to go is weird in most languages. It's weird in ours. So actually, this is a perfect analogy with ours. In English, we for the past tense of our verb go, we borrow the past tense of the verb to wind for our past tense. So I went to the store has no relation to go. I use wind as in like winding through the trees, right? I use the past tense of wind to describe for the past tense of the verb to go. It's just bizarre. Greek does the same thing with the verb erchomai, to come, which also can mean to go, so to go, to come, erchomai. For its future, instead of its past, it uses a different verb. It uses a super irregular verb that is ami with a circumflex, which in just a few places, but very annoying places, namely the first person singular and the second person singular, looks just like the verb to be, except it's got different accent marks. So you'll see here, ami is I will come or I will go, as opposed to ami without the macron. A with the macron, and a you will go and you are unfortunately exactly the same. Unless I'm missing something, they are identical. Yes, indeed they are. Outside of that, it's not so bad. The only other actual ambiguity, I wonder if you spotted it, if you were going quickly, you might have missed that, quite annoyingly, the third person singular future, to go, looks very much like the third person plural, to be. AC with a macron, not an AC without a macron, with an acute or a grave on the final syllable, is the only difference there. This isn't that hard. This is mostly a thing to be aware of, to sort of see these and know there is a weird future to go that is no resemblance whatsoever to the underlying verb erchomai. No similarity. It is just a different verb they're using the future for, and it's a super regular verb that belongs to a class of verbs that you won't learn till the end of Greek. But basic gist, add a sigma. Some weirdness, spelling weirdness can happen when you do that, but for the most part, you add a sigma to create the future, and you do so in between the stem and the personal ending.